Something that I have been finding absolutely fascinating just recently is learning all about how menopause impacts the brain. The things that is really scary for a lot of women during perimenopause when they're going through the brain fog and they're starting to really notice it with their memory is that it's a real fear that potentially it could be Alzheimer's or dementia. Around twice as many women have Alzheimer's, which is the most common form of dementia, than men. Alzheimer's, dementia isn't actually something that is about old age, and actually it starts in midlife. And so menopause is obviously the thing that we women have that men don't, and so she's really looked into the impact of menopause and declining estrogen on our likelihood of having Alzheimer's. It's a fascinating study. I just wanted to share these couple of points because it's often stated it's because women live longer than men, but actually Dr. Lisa Mosconi is digging into that because she's not convinced on that particular point, because actually we may live a few years longer, but not as many years that should be like, there's twice as many of us having, Alzheimer's. The fact that I've just had to go and Google to find out, to remind myself that it's Dr. Lisa Mosconi. Yes, I'm checking that as I'm looking now, who has wrote an incredible book called The Menopause Brain.
Does Alzheimer's affect more women than men? And they would be like, yes, it does. Unfortunately, almost 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women. Alzheimer's disease is a disease of old age, and women live longer than men. So unfortunately, more women than men end up developing Alzheimer's or living with Alzheimer's disease. But the difference is not that wide, right? So in the United States, so women live 4.5 years longer than men. But in the UK, for instance, the difference is 2 years. And Alzheimer's disease and dementia, the number one cause of death for women and not for men, showing that Alzheimer's disease is not a disease of the old. It's not a disease of old age. It's actually a disease of midlife with symptoms that start in old age. But the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, all the negative changes that take place in the brain, are very slow, they're very deliberate, and they're silent. You don't know that you have them for decades until the symptoms become clear. Red flags of Alzheimer's disease, we can see the beginning of the Alzheimer's plaque, the tangles and the neuronal loss in midlife. So what happens to women and not men in midlife that could potentially increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease in women, right? And we show that menopause potentially plays a role, and I think it's becoming more and more accepted now that menopause is effectively a female-specific risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. This is estrogen-only therapy. So we were able, this meta-analysis was the first study that was able to look not just at any type of HRT together, but we were able to really look at estrogen-only therapy and estrogen and progestogen therapy. And then we were able to look at each therapy initiated in midlife or more than 10 years after menopause. But this is what we have, right? So this is the best we can do with the data we have at this point. So with estrogen-only therapy started in midlife, there was a significant 32% reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia later in life. Start estrogen-only therapy more than 10 years after surgery or after menopause, in this case is for women with hysterectomies, then the effect was neutral. For estrogen progestogen, which is
That's
important.
the synthetic progestogens.
This combined therapy initiated in midlife or within 10 years of the onset of menopause was associated with a 23% reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
If you Google this lady, you will find so much crazy, amazing information. The work that she's doing is talking about how HRT and giving our body that estrogen in our midlife how potentially that can help us as we get older and potentially prevent us, having Alzheimer's. It's a big one. It's a really big one to get your head around, to be honest.